So here is Atema again, and today we'll be drawing some basic human proportions of a male and a female body. Andrew Loomis has also made a reference system that you have to divide a human body roughly into 8 heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, roughly. That is for a male body and for female body respectively. But keep in mind that you shouldn't use it all the time. This is just for reference. So, if we draw a typical human body of a male, then you would have a head as a measure of reference, then you would have a neck, something like this. Then when we draw a torso, we have our rib cage, and abdomen. And here, very important thing, when you are drawing arms, then according to Andrew Loomis, arms should be lower, a bit lower than the nipples, because nipples in male body are quite high positioned, whereas elbows are positioned exactly at the level of a navel or a bit higher. So here is navel, here we have our arms, here we have our pelvis. By the way, the hips of a male body are narrower than the shoulders, and opposed to the female body, where hips are slightly wider than the shoulders. So here we have, of course, our femurs, here we have our ankles, and here we have our feet. So just reference 1, 2. So there are roughly 2 heads between the nipples and between the forehead. Then roughly 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So basically, according to Andrew Loomis, the feet should be placed somewhere like this. So here we have, let's say that these are our femur bones. Here we have knees, and here we also have something like ankles. Of course, once again, that is very messy. That is really messy. But to illustrate the proportions concept, just look at this. Here we of course have our shoulders. Shoulders in males are usually wider than in females, and the elbows are positioned exactly at the level of navel or lower. But opposed to females, the navel is positioned slightly lower than the elbows. So here we have elbows. Here we have also our arms, and also the wrists are positioned lower than the crotch area, and then the hips slightly above this. Of course, it looks messy, but still. So typical male body could look worse. Once again, that is very messy. That is really messy, but to illustrate the proportions concept, just look at this. Here we of course have our shoulders. Shoulders in males are usually wider than in females, and the elbows are positioned exactly at the level of navel or lower. But opposed to females, the navel is positioned slightly lower than the elbows. So here we have elbows, here we have also our arms, and also the wrists are positioned lower than the crotch area, and then the hips slightly above this. Of course, it looks messy, but still. So typical male body could look something like this. When drawing a female body, this is roughly the same. It is also 8 heads. But usually women have some very acute differences. Usually female bodies are shorter than the male ones, and the hips are wider than the shoulders. Those are 2 key differences between the male and the female body. So let's see this. So once again, we have a head, then a neck roughly. When drawing a torso, you can also draw a rib cage, something like this. Then we have abdomen area, and then when we are drawing a female body from the front, then we should portray hips slightly wider than the shoulder area. And opposed, and what's interesting, when we are drawing a female figure from behind, it is reversed. So hips seem a bit narrower than the shoulders, but in front of the body, hips are usually wider than the shoulders. So here we have our arms. Also nipples in females are positioned lower than those in male body. So it's something like this. Here we have our nipples, and as you see, they are positioned shorter. They are positioned lower than those on the male body. Then we have our hips. Of course, it's still very messy, and of course sometimes when you are drawing quickly, those positions are quite hard to maintain, but it doesn't matter. Just to see that it it has a common pattern. And then, of course, Andrew Loomis says that you can draw the lower part of the women's legs a bit larger, larger than the rest of the body, but that's up to you. And of course, sometimes, especially in old art, women were portrayed on high heels. Today that is not obligatory, but you may also add a couple of inches or centimeters to women's height using high heels. So here we also have our ankles, and of course what's important that also females' wrists are positioned lower than the crotch area, and overall that is how it should look like. So let's summarize. What have I done? I have divided a human body into 8 heads. So let's portray this. 1, 2. By the way, just to illustrate the concept. So when we are using heads is like a unit of measurement, and in a female body we can roughly have 2 heads like that, but in a male's body we have roughly 2 1/3. So that would be something like this, and maybe 1/3 of a head this. So male body is 2 1/3, female body is just 2 heads. That is wide. And usually the distance between the nipples and between the navel in females is roughly 1 single head between the nipples and between the navel area. So those are the key concepts that you can keep in mind when drawing both female and male bodies. And once again, don't stick too much to those proportions because they are very, very relative. So once again, to summarize, male body is roughly 8 heads tall. Also, the hips are narrower than the shoulders from both front and from the behind perspective. Whereas in females, the height is usually also 8 heads, but from the front perspective, the hips seem a bit wider than the shoulders, but from behind perspective, it's reversed. Also, women are usually portrayed wearing high heels, but it's not obligatory. You may draw them exactly like male. There is roughly 1 head distance between women's nipples and navel area, and nipples in female bodies are positioned lower than those on the male body. The distance between shoulders in male body is roughly 2 1/3 of heads, but in female body that is only 2 heads. So basically that is all the basics of human proportions that you should keep in mind when drawing. If you have enjoyed, please hit the like and subscribe button, stay tuned, and wait for my other videos of the drawing cycle.